It was on November 10th in the year 1775 that our awesome nation saw the birth of our United States Marine Corps. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress passed a resolution stating that, quote, 2 battalions of Marines be raised, unquote, for service as landing forces for the recently formed Continental Navy. The resolution, drafted by future U.S. President John Adams and adopted in Philadelphia, created the Continental Marines and is now observed as the birth date of the United States Marine Corps. Serving on land and at sea, the original U.S. Marines distinguished themselves in a number of important operations during the Revolutionary War. The first Marine landing on a hostile shore occurred when a force of Marines under Captain Samuel Nicholas captured New Providence Island in the Bahamas from the British in March of 1776. Nicholas was the first commissioned officer in the Continental Marines and is celebrated as the first Marine Commandant. After American independence was achieved in 1783, the Continental Navy was demobilized and its Marines disbanded. In the next decade, however, increasing conflict at sea with revolutionary France led the U.S. Congress to establish formally the U.S. Navy in May 1798. 2 months later, on July 11th, President John Adams, our nation's second president, signed the bill establishing the U.S. Marine Corps as a permanent military force under the jurisdiction of the Department of the Navy. United States Marines saw action in the so-called quasi-war with France and then fought against the Barbary pirates of North Africa during the first years of the 19th century. Since then, the United States Marines have participated in all wars of the United States, and in most cases were the first soldiers on the field. In all, Marines have executed more than 300 landings on foreign shores. Today, there are more than 200,000 active duty and reserve Marines, divided into 4 divisions stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Camp Pendleton, California, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Okinawa, Japan. Each division has 1 or more expeditionary units ready to launch major operations anywhere in the world on 2 weeks' notice. Marine expeditionary units are self-sufficient with their own tanks, artillery, and air forces. The motto of the service is Semper Fidelis, meaning always faithful in Latin. On November 10th in the year 1808, the Osage tribe cedes Missouri and Arkansas land to the U.S. government. In a decision that would make them one of the wealthiest surviving Native American nations, the Osage tribe agrees to abandon their lands in Missouri and Arkansas in exchange for a reservation in Oklahoma. The Osage were the largest tribe of the Southern Sioux people, occupying what would later become the states of Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. When the first Anglo explorers and settlers moved into this region, they encountered a sophisticated society of Native Americans who lived in more or less permanent villages made of sturdy earthen and log lodges. The Osage, like the related Quapaw, Ponca, Omaha, and Kansa people, hunted buffalo and wild game like the Plains Indians, but they also raised crops to supplement their diets. Although the Southern Sioux warred among themselves almost constantly, Americans found it much easier to understand and negotiate with these more sedentary tribes than with the nomadic Northern Sioux. American negotiators convinced the Osage to abandon their traditional lands and peacefully move to a reservation in southern Kansas in 1810. When American settlers began to covet the Osage Reservation in Kansas, the tribe agreed to yet another move, relocating to what is now Osage County, Oklahoma, in 1872. Such constant pressure from American settlers to push Native Americans off valuable lands and onto marginal reservations was all too common throughout the history of Western settlement. Most tribes were devastated by these relocations, including some of the Southern Sioux tribes like the Kansa, whose population was 1,700, was reduced to only 194 following their disastrous relocation to a 250,000-acre reservation in Kansas. The Osage, though, proved unusually successful in adapting to the demands of living in the world dominated by Anglo-Americans, thanks in part to the fortunate presence of large reserves of oil and gas on their Oklahoma reservation. In concert with their effective management of grazing contracts to Anglos, the Osage amassed enormous wealth during the 20th century from their oil and gas deposits, eventually becoming the wealthiest tribe in North America. On November 10th in 1969, Sesame Street, a pioneering TV show that would teach generations of young children the alphabet and how to count, makes its broadcast debut. Sesame Street, with its memorable theme song, "Can You Tell Me How to Get to Sesame Street?" went on to become the most widely viewed children's program in the world. It was aired in more than 120 countries, and yes, when I was a child, I was a viewer. The show was the brainchild of Joan Gans Cooney, a former documentary producer for public television. Cooney's goal was to create programming for preschoolers that was both entertaining and educational. She also wanted to use TV as a way to help underprivileged 3 to 5-year-olds prepare for kindergarten. Sesame Street was set in a fictional New York neighborhood and included ethnically diverse characters and positive social messages. Taking a cue from Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, a popular 1960s variety show, Sesame Street was built around short, often funny segments featuring puppets, animation, and live actors. This format was hugely successful, although over the years, some critics have blamed the show and its use of brief segments for shrinking children's attention spans. From the show's inception, one of its most loved aspects has been a family of puppets known as Muppets. Joan Gans Cooney hired puppeteer Jim Henson to create a cast of characters that became Sesame Street institutions, including Bert and Ernie, Cookie Monster, Oscar the Grouch, Grover, and Big Bird. I know them all. The subjects tackled by Sesame Street have evolved with the times. In 2002, the South African version of the program, Takalani Sesame, introduced a 5-year-old Muppet character named Cammy, who is HIV positive, in order to help children living with the stigma of a disease that has reached epidemic proportions. In 2006, a new Muppet, Abby Cadabby, made her debut and was positioned as the show's first female star character, in an effort to encourage diversity and provide a strong role model for girls. In May of 2019, a Muppet character whose mother is battling addiction was introduced, acquainting kids with the opioid crisis. It should be noted that since its inception, over 80 million Americans have watched Sesame Street. Historic information involves in documenting homicide file to be verified.